The past week saw a dramatic increase in protests inside Iran. From east to west, from Azeris to Kurds, from students to shopkeepers in Iran's famous bazaars, it seemed like the entire republic was engulfed in vast protests. In response, the Ayatollah's regime shut down the internet, and according to reports, there are at least hundreds of protesters killed and thousands of them arrested. President Trump said he is scheduled to meet Iranian leadership, although he might be forced to act beforehand in support of those seeking freedom in Iran. Iran's proxy Hezbollah also had a difficult week when the government of Lebanon declared it achieved state monopoly over the weapons in southern Lebanon. Israel, as predicted, said the Lebanese government's efforts were encouraging but insufficient and continued to target a terror organization in Lebanon. But this week also saw Israel and Syria, under American mediation, agreeing to set up a joint de-escalation and intelligence coordination mechanism. However, while Syria demands a clear timetable for an Israeli withdrawal from the territory it came to control during the war, it is not clear if Israel is willing and able to make these concessions. Hello everyone, this is Brief.IL by the INSS, a weekly dive into the events shaping Israel's national security. Every week, we will release an episode that breaks down the ongoing developments that matter the most to Israel's national security. My name is Ofir Dayan, and I'm a researcher specializing in anti-Semitism and delegitimization efforts here at the INSS, and with me in the studio is Reserve Major General Tamir Hayman, the Chief of IDF Military Intelligence until 2021, who today is Executive Director of the INSS, the Institute for National Security Studies. This is Brief.IL, let's begin. Hi, Tamir.
Hi, Ofir, and welcome to Brief INSS.
So, Tamir, we've seen demonstrations in Iran before, most notably 2009, 2010 with the Green Movements, later with the Masa Amini Women Life movement in 2022, 2023. And like now, thousands of people took to the streets and flooded them and protested. What is different this time? Why is this time so historic, unique?
This time is unique because the government, if the Iranian regime, has no solution. The situation in terms of economy in Iran is so dire that they cannot really invent themselves like they have done before. Previously, in the rounds of riots, they could have done something. But the ongoing situation that for so long in Iran created a different Iran. When you have 70% of inflation over food, that's impossible to bear. It's the peoples on the streets, the backbone of the Iranian public, it cannot really tolerate that kind of a prices rise and the erosion of the currency, the riyal in front of the dollar. So if previously, for example, there was riots regarding the hijab, the Masa Amini riots of what called women life freedom, they've changed the rules regarding the police, the morality police. They practically abolished their practice of arresting young women in the streets, and that's really calmed things down. And previously, in the what we call the diesel riots, when they lifted subsidies on fuel, they reinstated the subsidies, and then it calmed things down. Always there are two layers of riots in Iran. The immediate reason, economy, morality police, for example, and beneath there is the ground root cause of this regime and what it causes throughout this time. I think the time passed, it creates different Iran. They don't have any solution.
And so there's nothing they can do. They cannot abolish the morality police or release subsidies. There's nothing they can do to calm the streets down.
They can do two things. One is to return back to negotiation with the United States, and in conditioning the fact that they are regaining or returning back to negotiation, they will demand relief of the sanctions before even the starting of that negotiation. And I think that was proposed by the Iranian as exposed by President Trump. He said that on Air Force One.
Yeah.
that they've reached out for us. That's one. That's the smartest things to do. They would probably flatter Trump, give him this posture of the peacemaker of the world, and they will host him in
Like
Iran.
all smart leaders do.
Yeah, and if they will do a good job in that matter, they might get away from that, and the USA will give them this lifeline of relieving of sanctions. But I think they are a bit late in that aspect. If they would have done that 3 weeks, 4 weeks ago, I think Trump will follow it. Right now, when you are seeing growing signs of destabilization and maybe a collapse of the regime, why help them now? The second thing they can do is to brutally defeat the riots. They have enough in the toolkit that they haven't really used so far. There are 2 million besieged fighters, operatives, I don't know how to call them, and those are the most brutal element of the Iranian regime. They look like civilians, they act like civilians, but they are horrible. They create their main target is to create terror. It's to create such kinds of atrocities on the streets that nobody will dare go out and protest. And secondly, the IRGC. I think the IRGC was deployed against the riots, but not in mass scales. They have 200,000 operatives in the IRGC, and I think we haven't really seen even tiny part of that being deployed on the street. So they have other things to do. The problem that can create a negative outcome by increasing the numbers of riots, because the protest will kind of...
Yeah, and so you mentioned President Trump and what he said last night while we're recording. So Saturday night, he said that Iran's leaders reached out to him and he's scheduled to meet them, but he might have to act before the meeting. How do you think the American posture in this situation and what America says and does influences us? How the Israeli infrastructure, the Israeli system reacts to what's happening in Iran?
Yeah. First of all, that's Trump being Trump. He's toying with them. After Venezuela, he's the most powerful, unpredicted leader in the world. Not just by stating things that previously would need the approval of the Congress or legislation. He's just saying, and he does it very successfully. In Venezuela, United States carried out an assault that Putin dreamed of achieving in Ukraine in the first round when he started the war. And United States Army Special Forces did it in a very, very spectacular manner. No doubt about it. So when you have that kind of a leader and he's being backed with the most powerful army in the world and apparently very, very professional, that gives him a posture that he can toy with them, give another rounds of threats, and ambiguously speaking about negotiation, he's confusing them, and he's doing a very good job in that aspect. As for Israel, there are maybe 3 scenarios that can influence Israel directly. One, if United States strikes, no matter if it's a limited strike, or a massive assault on the regime foundations, the retaliation will be against United States' presence in the Gulf states, but also against Israel. As the chairman of the parliament of Iran, Ghalibaf, who is a very, very prominent leader, he's a former IRGC commander, he's very, very well respected among the IRGC. He said that out publicly. If United States strike, we will strike Israel. Second line of friction could be miscalculation. Iranian may be worried about the fact that Israel will exploit the situation and will preemptively strike against the missile project, or maybe to enhance the destabilization of the government, the Iranian government, and they will act before in order to surprise Israel, and that creates this kind of attention that we are seeing almost on a daily basis. And the third, when they are cornered or they are back to the wall, they will create a massive destruction, massive shifting of the attention and strike Israel as a way to divert the attention, to divert all of the tensions, all of the trends in the streets, evoking a war in Israel will destroy the demonstration immediately because Israel will retaliate and that will stop. I'm not sure that that's the most probable scenario, but we should take that in mind also.
So many Israelis look at these protests, and some of us are very happy, are very optimistic about the future of Iran. Before we move on to the next topic of our podcast, first of all, I would like to remind our viewers and our listeners that the INSS features a detailed account of the protest where you can follow what is happening with clear data points on what's happening. But also, I would like to ask you, what are possible endgames of this movement, of these protests, and what does it mean for Israel? Either way, it will end.
Of course, it's very hard to predict internal collapse of governments, regime. Intelligence agencies all across the world have a clear record of failure. Nobody can anticipate where and how it will happen. So we really don't know. It seems like everything is shaking right now. The situation is very fragile. What can we imagine? First, there could be some intermediate transition of power from the supreme leader to a kind of elected, not really elected, official that will take over as a dictatorship for the time being. Okay, like back in the French Revolution, after chaos, they gave Napoleon Bonaparte the role of a dictator for an intermediate time that stretched well over that time. So that's a practice that they can do. They will probably nominate someone very respectable by the IRGC, so to ensure their support, and they will maybe go to negotiation with the United States in order to relieve sanctions and to promise huge reforms in terms of economy, etc., etc. That's how they will regain confidence of the mass. And after a short time, they will return back to the previous. Second scenario may be the elimination of the supreme leader, maybe by a foreign entity strike or by the fact that he just disappears, steps down, goes to retirement or goes wherever you can imagine. And if the IRGC will not take over, we will have a short period of destabilized Iran, and maybe there's a growing sense that Raza Pahlavi, the son of the Shah, will be imposed on the Iranian by the Americans. So he will be presented as the next solution. And there's growing sentiments. Maybe it's an influence campaign, I don't know. But his name is being raised. And although he is a part of the very, very non-popular Shah legacy, that may be a solution. And a third option is an unknown leader from the merchants society, or maybe from the oil sector, or maybe from the students that will emerge to take over from that chaos.
What do you think are the implications of any of these cases for Israel? So obviously, Raza Pahlavi would be great. He discusses publicly his will to cooperate with Israel, but he might be perceived as an American entity being forced on Iran, and so on. So do you think that Israel carries a risk with this spontaneous leader rising from the protests?
I think nothing can get worse than the situation right now in front of this regime. I cannot really imagine a worse regime than we are having today, which is really the source of all Israel national security problem. And I cannot imagine something more problematic than that regime. You raised a very interesting point that I want to raise. The fact that the Shah was in 1953 a democratic elected leader in Iran tried to reinstate democracy in Iran and to nationalize the oil industry. The story ended up with the Shah being installed instead of him, and the oil was
by the West.
to be exploited by the West. This story, this trauma from 1953 still hovers all in the streets and above Raza Pahlavi. So that diminishes the potential of his appointment as the successor. But it's out there definitely.
So you very clearly stated in your response that Iran is the source of most of, if not all, Israel's national security problems. And one of those problems is Hezbollah. And this is our second topic for today. You wrote in an article that you published in N12, an Israeli news channel, you wrote that time works in Hezbollah's benefit. That with time they're able to rebuild their capabilities, their command and control structures. So if you can please elaborate for our viewers and our listeners, how does that look like, the rebuilding of Hezbollah?
Well, you must split Lebanon into two sections. Southern to the Litani River, it's a whole different scenario than northern to the Litani River. Southern to the Litani River, there's not really much reconstruction of its abilities. Most of its sites, Hezbollah sites, are abandoned, and part of them were being cleared by the Lebanese armed forces. And in the immediate vicinity to the border, the lines of the villages that across the Israeli-Lebanese border are all destroyed, most of them destroyed, and there's no real infrastructure of Hezbollah. So that's very positive scenario. And by the way, southern to the Litani River, Israel defense forces are very efficient in maintaining the level of erodence of Hezbollah by what we call enforcement, by the fact that Israel defense forces are striking almost on a daily basis, few times a day. Each signs of reconstruction is being hit immediately. Northern to the Litani River, it's a whole different story. Hezbollah still exists there. Iran sends money in a huge scale. Even lately, they tried to renew the transition of money by the foreign ministry of Iran. That's a practice that they had years ago. So that money is used in order to purchase weapons systems from the collapsing Syria. Apparently, in Syria, there are local arms traders who got their hands on the stockpiles of ammunition of the Syrian army after the collapse of Syria, and they are selling it to the Hezbollah. And another issue that's really important to understand, that Syria, although collapsed, although not part of the Shiite crescent, it's not a country, it's not a state that fully controls the roads, fully controls the border. It's a coalition of militias that spread all across the Syrian desert. And in that lack of control is being exploited by Iran, and they keep on sending weapons through the ground line of connections between Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. That continues on. And lastly, the Lebanese armed forces is weaker than Hezbollah. Although promised to be by France and United States that they will support the Lebanese armed forces, nothing is done in that aspect. It is still weak. There's not a single dollar that passes from United States to Lebanese armed forces. And the government wants to do more, but it has no capabilities to do more. So if you combine all of those together, you get the situation that northern to the Litani River, Hezbollah is rebuilding itself. It is nominating new commanders. It is reassembling or replenishing the stockpiles of rockets, rebuilding or manufacturing drones, UAVs. By the way, that is considered to be the most successful weapon system that used during the war. In terms of Hezbollah assessment of its success, UAVs created chaos in Israel, according to their beliefs, so that they are investing a lot of effort in rebuilding that stockpile. And although it is not the same Hezbollah that we have encountered during the years, it is not the same strong army that it used to be, but the trend is negative. So even though right now it's not a crucial threat on Israel, and as you are seeing, it does not respond. Israel is striking, and nothing is being responded by the Hezbollah. The long term, the trend, if you do nothing, is very negative.
So the Lebanese government says that they took control over the weaponry in southern Lebanon. Obviously, Israel doesn't believe that. Israel issued a statement saying the Lebanese government's efforts are encouraging but insufficient. And it seems like Israel is preparing for a kinetic confrontation with Hezbollah once more. And I want to ask you, what can Israel do different to prevent all those things that you described and this trend from becoming very negative?
Well, we can work on the military level and on diplomatical level. In the diplomatical level, the key player is again Trump. Like most things in the Middle East right now, if he will insist on building a strong Lebanon that can confront Hezbollah, enforce the disarmament of Hezbollah, and if that will be combined with the pressure on the Iranian regime that support Hezbollah, that may have some positive results. Apparently, it seems like President Trump is not that interested in Lebanon. It's not in his focus right now. In terms of army, in terms of military activity that can deflect this trend, two things we can do. One is what we called back then the operation between the wall, which is basically what we are doing right now, but more extended. Striking on a daily basis, eroding, disrupting. It's not that clear that it will deflect the trend, but that's something we can do. So far, as said, successful in southern Lebanon, not that successful in northern Lebanon. And the third is a massive campaign. Which is supposed to be designed differently than previously. What can be differently? Maneuver. The previous operation, the maneuver was very minor, few kilometers top. This time, the maneuver can be more extended. The importance.
To what extent, in your opinion?
I would not recommend online to what extent, but much more than we have done before.
Okay.
Because the value of ground, the value of land is crucial in the Middle East. That's the thing that drives motivation to change something. We are holding 5 points, very tactical 5 points. See how much that aggravates the international community and Iran. It creates momentum for discussion. So the only purpose of retaking land is not to occupy it indefinitely. It's only to gain some leverage, gain some bargaining chips that you can somehow exchange for a diplomatical procedure, which is normalization with Lebanon or maybe a peace agreement with Lebanon. We can go that far. In order to do that, I would highly recommend that we will decide before launching this large-scale operation what's the end state. Make sure that it is aligned with United States interest and ensure that immediately after the operation, the diplomatical procedure starts, and not doing the mistake that we have done before to give them time.
And the same results that we got before. So speaking of countries in which we hold strategic points, let's move on to Syria. And this week, Israel and Syria came to the negotiation table, mediated by the United States, of course, to discuss and agree on a de-escalation and intelligence coordination mechanism. What is this mechanism? Is it a security agreement? What is it? What does it entail? And what does it mean for Israel?
Okay. So let's start what the different parties want. Syria wanted one thing, to re-establish the 1974 security agreement, which practically means that they wanted and insisted on us withdrawing from the buffer zone. As you may know, the buffer zone is an area in Syria that is being controlled by the Israel Defense Forces since the collapse of the Assad regime.
Is this a concession that Israel is willing or able to make to withdraw?
The problem is that we were able to make that concession 6 months ago, but the situation on the ground, because of lack of political discussions, has changed dramatically in terms of tactical threats right now. Right now, the situation in the Syrian Golan Heights is more complicated and more dangerous to our security than before. There are for 4 reasons, 4 threats. One, the Iranian are trying to reestablish their presence in the Golan Heights by re-engaging with locals that previously were somehow connected to Hezbollah or Ministry of Intelligence in Iran. Secondly, Palestinian Islamic Jihad had a very elaborated and very good deployment in the Syrian Golan Heights, and Hamas is using that Palestinian PIJ, the Palestinian Islam Jihad, to reconnect to groups in the area and trying to create activity against our presence in the buffer zone. So far, with 0 success, but the attempts are getting more and more sophisticated and more dangerous. Third, there are just local frustrated gunmen that are frustrated from the situation that there's a lack of control of the new Syrian regime, Syrian government, who doesn't really take care of the daily basic needs of the civilians in the Golan Heights. And those local gunmen, let's call them that way, accuse Israel of that aspect because that is what transmitted to them from the government in Syria. It's because of Israel presence, because of Israel activities, the Syrian government cannot take care of those civil needs. And lastly, that is the Israelis, we are not that confident of the stability and the credibility of the security forces of the Assad regime who was deployed there. You may have seen the video when they are passing across Israeli soldiers, and they are shouting, "We are on the way to Jerusalem, and we will defeat the Zionistic regime," and they are carrying all of those labels, tags, flags that resembles Al-Qaeda and resembles Al-Nusra. Not very confident in building measure for us to be relying on them to take over the security of the buffer zone. All of those 4 negative trends evolve during the past 6 to 8 months. So Israel cannot afford itself right now to withdraw unilaterally without ensuring that someone else, credible, efficient, loyal, will take care of those emerging threats.
And yet, Israel and Syria did reach some sort of agreement this week. What is it?
Well, it's just coordination of the future strikes of Israel. Basically, there will be some form of a mechanism in Amman, in Jordan, and it will ensure the accuracy of Israel intelligence intelligence sharing on emerging threats that are both threatening the Syrian regime and Israel. For example, Iranian transition of arms, Iranians deployment, Palestinian terrorists who are trying to gain some foothold in the. So in each those kind of cases, Israel will send those demands from this trilateral panel of coordination, and supposedly the Syrian regime will take care of that. And if that's not happening, Israel will step in, and that will diminish the tensions between Israel and Syria because of the ongoing strikes that are considered to be liability, considered to be by the Syrian regime as destabilizing element.
So de-escalation and not security agreement.
De-escalation, deconfliction. Maybe if successful, it will diminish the numbers of strikes that Israel conducts because others will do that instead of Israel. And there's another element that was very important to Israel, which is the Druze community. So far, the goal of establishing a hudna,
Cessation
how
of
we call it hudna, a
violence,
peace,
temporary cessation of violence.
and that consists of the three Druze sheikhs that control the Jabal Druze going to Damascus and striking a deal with Ashara. That's not succeeded yet, but there's a promise of the Syrian regime that they will not intervene in what happens in the Druze mountain, which is sensitive in terms of Israel involvement.
So I want to end our discussion with somewhat of a theoretical question. Um, based on everything you've said, it seems like Syria is highly unstable, and there are several elements trying to get a foothold inside Syria, whether it's the Druze, the Kurds, the PIJ, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Ashar regime. Wouldn't it be better for Israel to just have a fragmented Syria, a la Somalia, something like that? And wouldn't it be better for Israel's national security to not have one regime that threatens Israel, but several footholds of different organizations?
That's a great question, and it makes sense as long as the Syrian different factions are fighting each other and there's a non-stable, not strong state. It's a more tactical threat than a strategic threat to Israel. So tactical threats we can handle, as we are seeing, as we are doing right now, and a consolidated Syria in the long term, if will be influenced by Turkey, Qatar, maybe it will be a jihadistic state, we don't know, Ashara, maybe that's not a smart thing to do. I don't think so, because maybe for the intermediate time, for the short span of time, that's a smart thing to do. But in the long term, it will be exploited by Israeli adversaries in a negative manner. There are looming forces in the Middle East that will exploit this fragile situation. Iran will probably be involved and will try to reestablish the ground line of communication and maybe presence by small groups of Shiite minorities that will be affiliated to Iran, and that will establish bottom-up a new form of Iranian Shiite militias, probably. Turkey, Qatar will be involved. ISIS will exploit the situation and regain its footprint. ISIS is not disappeared from Syria; it still exists in the deserts of the Syrian desert is full of them, and they will probably try to regain their retake, and China will exploit it. Everything will try to take part of that. So in the long term, we would probably, I think it's better for Israel to have a solid, reliable, stable, controlled state, one address for all. But we must ensure that that one address is affiliated and restrained by United States, Europe, other entities, and not following this very radical Islamist jihadist manner. So I would recommend a gradual process. Take it slow. In the meanwhile, establish or handle the conflict of this turbulence inside Syria and make sure that the security interests of Israel are secured. But in the long term, create a vision, a strategy, and it's better off being conducted by United States, because the special connection between President Trump and Ashara, and it seems like there is an interest to step in and make some change. And that Israel, I think, must not abstract that, but from behind the scene, make sure that it is a long process and it has reliable stepping marks that will ensure that we are not losing the navigation towards a very radical regime.
So that's all for today. I think we learned a lot. Thank you, Tamir.
Thank you, Ofir.
And that's it for this episode. This was Brief.IL by INSS, a new weekly dive into the events shaping Israel's national security. We warmly invite you to follow us on any podcast platform of your choice. You can also watch us on YouTube on the INSS channel. Thank you to the team, Ariel Nugrian, Shai Shachaf, and Omer Vixelbaum, and see you next week.